welcome back to Kisty Reads. I have had a kind of an embarrassing evening, so I'm a little jittery, but I'm really excited about today's video because I love talking about books that I have either hauled or that I want to haul, and this is kind of going to be a pre-haul video, which means that they're books that I want to haul and probably will be buying soon, but that I haven't bought yet, and I'm really excited about them. For some of them, I've heard a lot of booktubers talk about them, and for others, I've just discovered them on their own, just on a site or Goodreads or whatever, and they just seem so good. And not that I need any more books, but it's always more fun when you have piles and piles of books all over your apartment like I now do, and all I want to do is add to them. So let's get into it. I have about 10 books that I think will be really fun to talk about, and I can't wait to talk about them with you. So the first book that I want to talk about is the Jade War and Jade City series. I think it's going to be a trilogy, but I'm not really sure. I know that there's 2 books out right now, and it's kind of about warring families from what I understand. I don't know much about it, but I know that all of BookTube is in love with this book and in love with this series, and I've heard so many good things about it that I feel like I need to get into it too. If you've read either of these, or obviously you have to read one before you read the other, but if you've read these books, let me know what you think of them. I feel like I haven't heard one bad thing. It's all been rave reviews, and even though I don't know much, I know that it's fantasy, I know that it's adult fantasy, and I am really excited about it. So the next book is called Kingdom of Liars by Nick Martell, and this is based around a magic system where it takes memories in order for you to use magic, and it follows the character who happens to be the son of someone who betrayed the king in this world, and so he ends up going back to court and finding out that the royal family is going through it and trying to figure that out and find bits and pieces of his past, as far as I understand. I heard about this book on BookTube. I was watching someone's channel and they were talking about how amazing and cool it was. And it's also adult fantasy. If you don't know, I'm trying to get more into adult fantasy. I have a lot of YA to get through, but I do want to get more into adult fantasy, and I feel like this might be a good one to start with. It sounds really intriguing. It sounds like a kind of magic system that I could get into, and it also sounds very high stakes. All things that I do love in a book. The third book is also part of a series. It's called From Blood and Ash, and I think the second one in this series is already out as well. It's by Jennifer L. Armentrout. I'm not sure if this one is YA or adult, but it's definitely a fantasy story. And I don't know much about this, but I know that it's very popular on BookTube right now, and I definitely want to buy both of these books. I've heard that it's along the lines of, if you like Sarah J. Maas and if you like vampires, you're gonna like this series, and I like Sarah J. Maas's books. I've only read the Throne of Glass series, but I've loved it, and I loved the characters. I loved how she did everything, so I feel like I might really like this series, especially when it's combined with vampires, and I love everything vampire, all the TV shows, all the movies, everything. I haven't read too many vampire novels, so this might be a really cool one to start with. If you read this book, I definitely want to know what you think of it. I know some folks read it in the last few months, and it kind of gained popularity in that time. I don't know if it's because the second book was recently released or whatever, but I want to know what you thought of it because I'm very intrigued by this, and I've heard good things. I haven't heard anything bad yet, but I wonder if that's just because I don't know too many folks that have read it. So let me know in the comments down below. The next book is called The Kings of the Wild by Nicholas Ames. And this one I came across another booktuber's channel as well, and she described it and it sounded so interesting. I can't remember exactly who it was, but she made it sound like it was one of the funniest fantasy stories ever. This is also an adult fantasy, and it is about this band of warriors that back in the day, they were like the most badass band of warriors you could ever like fight with and fight against. And in this story, they come back together because one of the members' daughter gets into trouble, and I think she gets kidnapped by the other kingdom and they have to go and save her. It's kind of like a the boys are back in town sort of story, and I think it's just gonna be like a really fun read, and then you have fantasy and like kingdoms and everything else mixed into it that I just feel like I can't imagine this book not being fun. It just seems like the most fun adult read that I found recently, and I'm so intrigued by that. Again, I'm trying to get back into adult fantasy, and I just feel like this set of books that I'm talking about right now is really adult fantasy based, and this one just seems really up my alley. So This next series, I think it's the 5th series or 5th book that I'm talking about, is a Sarah J Maas series. It's A Court of Thorns and Roses, and I'm intrigued by this because one, I did like her previous series, Throne of Glass, and I really also like reading books about fae. For some reason, I didn't really like it. I like the kind of weird morals and cruel dynamics that happen in that world, and especially that they're just so unbelievably beautiful and their morals aren't like ours. I just find that so fascinating. So this series by Sarah J Maas, A Court of Thorns and Roses, is said to have fae, and it's said to be very much the dynamic of the cruel fae that kind of prey or look down on the humans, and I've heard really great things about this series. I've also heard things where people don't like this series, but I think those folks also just don't like Sarah J Maas novels, which is completely fine. I can understand and maybe see why, but I find a lot of entertainment in the novels that she writes, and I really appreciate them, and they kind of make me want to read. The more books that I love and am entertained by, the better. I just feel like it's fun, why not? Like, reading can be just a fun thing, and I love it. So I'm excited about this series. I know that everyone has read it by now, so I feel like I could ask you to comment down below what you thought of it. Please, if you have thoughts about it, please do. I've just heard that if you liked Throne of Glass, you'll like A Court of Thorns and Roses, and especially because I love fae, I think it's definitely gonna be like at least 4 stars for me, just out of pure entertainment value. So the next item isn't quite a book. I wanted to say The Way of the Kings by Brandon Sanderson, but really I feel like it's just any book by Brandon Sanderson. I've just been told to start with that one. I don't know exactly how his worlds weave into each other, but I know that some of his series are in the same world, just like years apart or time apart. And I don't know how that works, but I've been told to start with The Way of the Kings. Let me know if that's wrong. I definitely don't want to start with the wrong book, but I also want to get into his writing because I've just heard so many good things. And I've realized recently, not a bad thing, but I've realized recently that I read a lot of books by female authors, especially in the last like year and a half. One of those authors being N.K. Jemisin. I really love her writing. And after that, I just started reading a lot of female authors, and Brandon Sanderson probably will be the first male author that I've really read from in a long time, and I've just heard phenomenal things from other female readers. It just seems like a good choice. Everyone seems to love him on BookTube, on Goodreads, even folks that aren't part of the like book Twitter, BookTube world really love him. So I'm looking forward to any book, but The Way of the Kings is the one that I think I'm gonna start with, unless there's a better recommendation. So let me know. So the next book I actually found out just through like an email newsletter about books that were coming out, and it's called The Once and Future Witches by Alex E. Harrow. And when I first saw it, it really intrigued me because the title is kind of like a spin-off of The Once and Future King, which is the King Arthur story. And I was like, I wonder if this is a spin-off of the King Arthur story and just about like Merlin and the witches, but it's not. It's actually based on witches in New Salem in like the 1890s, where there was no such thing as a witch, and then these 4 women get together and discover the old ways and old magic and suddenly become witches. So I wonder if it's like a witches coming of age story of how witches came to be in Salem, which is really very popular in terms of like witchcraft and witches and witch burnings. I'm just really curious. I don't know if it's based on a real story. I don't know if it's just purely fiction. It is a fiction novel, but I don't know if it's based on any true stories or anything like that. But I know that it was newly released, I think in October, and it just seems like a really good and intriguing read. I live in Boston, which is really close to Salem, and I love going to Salem. It's one of my favorite spots in Massachusetts. So anything that I can read, that I can get my hands on that is Salem related, I absolutely usually adore. So I'm definitely excited about this one. I'm excited that it's set in Salem, which I think is gonna be the Salem in Massachusetts, and that it's about witches and coming of age witchcraft. So this next novel, I don't really know how to describe, and even after reading the synopsis, I still don't know how to describe it, but it's definitely very purely fantasy, and it is also an adult fantasy novel. And it is called The Ninth Reign by Jen Williams. Now, I first heard about this book purely on BookTube, purely because someone was raving about it, and I will link her channel down below. She's a bigger booktuber than I am, and by that I mean she has more followers, so you guys probably know about her, but I'll link her channel and I'll link that video down below so you can check it out, because she does have a few other recommendations, and those are books that I'm going to be talking about next, because through that recommendations list I found a few books that I now want to buy myself. Definitely like a BookTube made me do it moment but no complaints here. Go ahead and read the synopsis if you're interested in this, but it's definitely a hardcore adult fantasy, and apparently it's beautifully written. The plot and everything about it is really great, and even on Goodreads the reviews are amazing, so I am 100% down to buy and read this. I've heard that, you know, from her, it's very difficult to buy this in the States, especially electronically, so I think Book Depository might be a better option for those of us in North America to order it from. Just FYI, in case you do get as intrigued by this book as I am. So the next book is another one that she also spoke of, and it's called The Book of Klee by M.R. Carey. Now this is more of a post-apocalyptic fiction story. It's almost kind of like the post-apocalyptic stories where there's a village and you live within that village or town and you never venture beyond the walls, kind of like Allegiant. I think that's the one where they can't travel beyond the walls because they won't survive, and that's kind of a similar situation here where we have that post-apocalyptic world and this boy has never lived beyond that town or village, and so he doesn't know what's beyond the wall. The story is about him going beyond the wall, being able to survive and all this. And I love dystopian types of fiction, so I think this one is definitely up my alley. I don't usually read too much post-apocalyptic stuff because it can get a little sci-fi, and I'm not super into sci-fi, but I think this sounds like just the right amount of fiction plus post-apocalyptic world that it will be just interesting enough for me. And she raved about it, so what's not to love? I might as well check it out. The next and last book that I'm going to talk about today is called Hunted by the Sky by Tanaz Bathana, I think is how you pronounce her last name. But it is a world set in medieval India where one of our main characters, I believe you pronounce her name Gul, who has a star-shaped birthmark, and apparently this causes her to be highly sought after, and girls with that kind of birthmark get hunted and like taken, and so she gets rescued by this clan of women who teach her warrior magic. And then we have our other main character called Kavas, and his father is terminally ill, and he is signing up to the army in order to save his father and do whatever he can to save his father. And then he meets Gul, and they kind of get entangled into this vengeance mission that Gul has because her parents were murdered by the people who are taking the girls with the star-shaped birthmarks. So all in all, it sounds really interesting. It sounds like it's a lot of entanglement, a lot of intertwining of characters' plot lines and stories, a lot of mystery around magic and how the magic system works, and almost like magic is a little suppressed in this story and in this world. So that's really interesting to me. I love mysterious types of novels, especially because this one sounds like there's gonna be a little bit of romance in it too, and that is never a bad thing. So that's it for this video, guys. I hope that you enjoyed my little pre-haul video. Hopefully you'll see some of these books pop up in a haul later on this year or early next year. I will definitely be posting it. And if you have any recommendations, or if you read any of these books or got excited about any of them, just as excited as I got when I first heard about them, please let me know in the comments down below. And as always, if you like this video, please click the like button down below, and please subscribe to my channel because it really does help support my channel and for making content for you guys. Thank you.